Welcome back to Red Cedar Radar. I am joined this week for our preview episode by Adam Jacobi from Hawkeye Beacon, so the Iowa version of Spartans Illustrated through Rivals. How are you today, Adam?
I am doing fantastic. How about you?
I'm great. Thanks for asking, and thanks for joining. I really appreciate it. So we are going to kind of just jump right into previewing Iowa, how they've done this season, kind of breaking them down on offense and defense, and looking ahead to their matchup against MSU. Before we talk about the team at Iowa, can you share a little bit about your work at Hawkeye Beacon and kind of what you do for the site there?
Yeah, absolutely. I am the publisher and co-owner of Hawkeye Beacon. We were formerly known as Go Iowa Awesome, and before that, we were the original Blackheart Gold Pants on SB Nation. So I've been writing about the Hawkeyes as a blogger, if you will, for believe this will be the 18th year. It's a
Wow.
little weird to think that a blogging career is old enough to buy cigarettes, but here we are. And so I'm a credentialed reporter for the Hawkeyes. Currently, my two beats are football and women's basketball, and recruiting for both those sports as well. And I also have a managing editor and a fellow co-owner, Ross Binder, and our recruiting analyst, soon to be senior analyst or lead analyst, Elliot Clough, is on men's basketball and football and recruiting for both as well. So a robust Hawkeye operation there on
Yeah,
Rivals
awesome.
as well.
Yeah, Ross joined me last year for our preview episode, so I'm familiar, through the screen with him a little bit. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, awesome. So I will have Hawkeye Beacon's information linked down in the bottom of the episode. If you want to go check them out after you listen to us kind of break things down here, you can check them out there. Are you ready to jump right in, Adam?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk offense first. Kind of give me a couple of players to watch, things that you've seen the season so far, positives and negatives, just to give MSU fans or listeners in general a peek into Iowa offense.
Well, it's a bit of a different look offense this year, and that's because this is the first year in about a decade that Iowa has not had Brian Ferentz as its offensive coordinator. That is Tim Lester, who was rather recently at Western Michigan as the head coach. So I think football fans from your state are pretty familiar with him at this point. And it is, dare we say it, a 21st century offense for about the first time in the history of Iowa City. And there's RPOs, there's read options, there are some inside trap handoff that they used to a running back in the fullback position, and it was straight out of a 1950s playbook, and that's sort of the beauty of inventive football is you make the old new again. And so Iowa fans have actually had a bit of an offense to cheer for this year. And that really starts with Caleb Johnson, who is a bit of a fringe dark horse Heisman candidate at this point. And his season stats, there's a whole lot of running backs who would be thrilled with stats like 937 yards, 12 touchdowns. And really, what stands out about him is the 7.9 yards that he's getting per carry. And this is a very run heavy Iowa offense. Everybody knows the run is coming. Everybody knows they want to give it to Caleb Johnson, and he's still, running at nearly 8 yards a pop. And so that makes everything else about the Iowa offense operate just that little bit better. They're still getting used to the scheme, right? There's still, this is not world breaking, Mike Leach 3.0 stuff that they're running here, but it is certainly not the exercise in futility that the Brian Ferentz offense had become either. And then also in terms of how Iowa wants to play to its best players, tight end Luke Lachey, who was injured in the second game of last season, really came into the year as arguably the focal point of the passing offense. It hasn't really materialized that way. Iowa's actually using its wide receivers now and using multiple tight end sets. But Lachey is really rounding back into form as a blocker and has sort of that downfield catch radius that you really want to see from a big play tight end. And if Iowa can actually incorporate that downfield passing angle, Lachey's probably the number one target that they're going to use with the way this offense has developed so far.
Can you talk a little bit about Cade McNamara at the quarterback position, what you've seen from him this year and how he's looking, and kind of what you predict for him for the rest of the year going forward?
It's been a little bit of a mixed bag with McNamara, and some of it is positive, certainly, because coming back from multiple serious knee surgeries, and his legs were not in great shape even before the last ACL, and so he finally has that footwork back, that ability to actually run in a straight line without looking like he's got nuts and bolts flying off of him, or a trail of oil smoke behind him. Like, he can actually do athletic things on the field now, but there's still not a whole lot of arm strength, and it looks like he might not be, throwing full body motion yet. That it's still all sort of upper body strength. So, like, there was a play at the end of the Iowa State game where he couldn't get a Hail Mary 50 yards, and there aren't a whole lot of moments in the game, especially that because Iowa coaches know that he can't throw 50 yards, right? They're going to scheme around that. They're not going to put him in positions not to succeed, but it also means that Iowa's downfield heavy passing game has not been much of a prevalent aspect of this offense. So essentially, oddly enough, that means that it has fallen under the run game to be the big play aspect of this offense. It's a little bit of a paradox, but when you've got somebody as athletic, explosive as Caleb Johnson, and somebody whose arm is as sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of big playability like McNamara, yeah, your running game has to be the big play element of the offense. And fortunately for Iowa, that's exactly what has happened.
Yeah, I've watched Johnson play a couple different times throughout the last couple weekends, and he just finds holes that I don't think are there, and he's busts through, and I'm surprised by it every time. So I've been really impressed by his play. I've seen a couple people compare him to Kenneth Walker, and I love Kenneth Walker deeply. I think Michigan State fans do. So that scares me a little bit that they're comparing him to Walker, just because I've seen flashes of that as well, and we know what Walker could do to a team. So I think maybe Johnson is following in those footsteps a little bit.
Well, Walker was a special talent. And it's funny that you mentioned Michigan State running backs, because Johnson was talking about his playing ability, and especially his one of the touchdowns that he scored against Washington. And a lot of that had to do with patience and waiting for that hole. And he said that the running back whose film he studied was Le'Veon Bell. And Sparty fans are probably all nodding their head. They're like, yep. And once you see it, you almost can't unsee it, because there is that steadiness, that patience. And then when you have elite explosiveness like Le'Veon Bell did, like Caleb Johnson does, all of a sudden those pursuit angles vanish, and you can make a big play, and you can turn something that would be 10 to 15 yards into 60 yards. And so again, like, that is really how Iowa has incorporated big plays into the offense, because again, McNamara does not have the arm to do that.
Yeah. Anything else about the offense overall before we switch to defense?
Not really. It's just to sort of reiterate that it's a little bit nice to see an offense with a little bit of imagination and running motion before the snap. One of the critically bad things about the Brian Ferentz offense was they were dead last in FBS and just running pre-snap motion. And so it's sort of beginner level difficulty for defenses. So, Michigan State fans, you can actually watch when Iowa has a football. That's not just, bathroom break territory there. And the possessions will last more than 3 snaps most of the time, presumably.
Well, good to know. Very good to know. I think that's a perfect note. So switching over to defense, same thing. some players to watch and some positives and negatives that you've seen.
Yeah, when you're watching Iowa defense, it really does start with Jay Higgins in the middle. He is another preseason, or excuse me, midseason All American. He's putting up great tackle numbers, just like he did last year when he led Power Four tacklers. And he has really added another element to his game in terms of coverage, being able to disrupt passing lanes. He's always been a great tackler. He's always known exactly where to find the holes and which ones to attack. But now he is really disrupting that over the middle passing game. And he's making plays. And I even asked him and asked his buddy Nick Jackson, who was an all ACC linebacker at Virginia before he transferred to Iowa. And having those two in the middle is borderline unfair. It's sort of Holmes and Watson in terms of football IQ over the middle. And I asked Nick and I asked Jay, is he making that interception last year? Is he breaking up that pass last year? And both of them said no. He's really expanded his game. And so that is, you start with Jay, and then Sebastian Castro has been sort of an X factor off that cash position. He was making more disruptive plays last year. He had 8 pass breakups, 8 tackles for loss. And so now teams are trying to to sort of scheme away from him because they know, he was sort of the little mini, I don't want to call him shopper's value honey badger, but not quite Tyrann Mathieu, but that sort of type of disruption. And they know he's capable of it. Now they're trying to get away from him and trying to sort of scheme away from that. So how does Michigan State attack or maybe not attack Castro? How do they neutralize a threat like that? I think it's going to be one of the most fascinating chess matches of this whole game.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions, how MSU can match up to some of those things, some of those positives that you've talked about. Um, Anything else about the defense before we kind of jump into that topic specifically?
Yeah, Childs' mobility is going to be a very, very big weapon and a big part of how successful Michigan State can be on offense, because those dual threat QBs, especially ones that can improvise as opposed to, the mobility that you maybe have to scheme for, but the ones that can still make the plays downfield, the ones that can put secondaries into the will he run, will he pass, sort of put them into unwinnable positions where you have to make a choice one way or the other. The more the Childs can put Iowa's secondary into those positions, the better Michigan State is going to be. And so Iowa has really started to open up their defense to more, sort of smaller personnel, almost like dime package or like dime personnel, but they're still running 4-3 plays off of it. So basically, you've got a slot corner running a will linebacker playbook. So they find a lot of different ways to do sort of the same things, and ultimately, it's going to be how well Michigan State makes plays off schedule, makes plays that maybe don't correspond to how a play would be, drawn up. That sort of rogue playmaking ability is really probably going to be the difference between a win and a loss for the Spartans on Saturday.
And I think that's something that has mattered. I mean, maybe not so much when they played Ohio State, but in other games or Oregon. I I think Childs struggles in those situations a little bit just because he is young, and I think he will be a great quarterback. I just think there's some things that he needs to work through. And when put into those situations, he struggled a bit this year. So that will be interesting to watch. An interesting point that you brought up, because that's something that we've been watching week after week, maybe not go exactly how Childs wants it to go. Um,
Yeah, and Iowa is going to be a tough test for somebody who is still having to trust his eyes, because so much of Iowa's defense and Phil Parker, a legendary Spartan, even when he was strapping him up, to say nothing of what he's really accomplished as a coach, the reigning Broyles Award winner, owner, whatever you want to call it. So much of what makes his defense so dangerous is tricking quarterbacks into thinking a window is open when it's not. Is knowing when to use pressure in which certain situations, and oh, I'm going to flush the quarterback this way. Now my safeties know which direction to flow to, right? So much of that head game sort of defense, and this might be one of those learning opportunities for Childs. This might be one of those, all right, there's expert difficulty. Let's see how close you are to that. Because this is the sort of 4D chess of matchup defense. And I think it'll be fascinating to watch because it is beatable, but you have to get the defense off of their heels or back onto their heels before they do it to you first.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely a point to watch and something I'll be interested about and was already wondering about. So interesting that you brought that up as well. Talking about Michigan State and Iowa, kind of comparing, we've touched on this a little bit already, I guess, with Childs and the defense, but talk to me about Iowa on offense against Michigan State's defense. How does that match up?
Well, the critical component for Iowa in terms of this game is how well their offensive line does, especially over the course of 4 quarters, because there have been a lot of, let's say, just slow starts for the offense, and a big part of that has been defenses finding with some pretty relative ease ways to create mismatches in Iowa's blocking scheme, especially in pass protection. And so the game against Washington was the first game where they actually graded out better as a pass blocking unit than a run blocking unit. And they ended up being PFF's offensive line of the week. And I asked Kirk Ferentz about that at the weekly press conference, and I knew that he didn't really much care for PFF, right? Like I know that he's like, there's no way those numbers mean anything. And sure enough, like he was laughing before I was tongue twister there, even done with the question, and I knew why he was laughing. But what it really comes down to is they have started to figure out ways to be prepared for these attempts at mismatches off the edges. Now, that being said, there's a difference between being able to do that one game when it's been pretty much a season-long struggle, and it never being an issue again. So one of the things I'm really looking forward to seeing is how well Michigan State attacks the edges, how well they get that backside pressure that can really disrupt some of those slower developing runs, like you mentioned, when Johnson's sort of waiting for his hole to open up. Well, if a guy's bombing in off the backside and nobody's picking him up, then all of a sudden that patience turns into, leaving the fuse on too long on your dynamite, So that'll be fascinating to watch. And, Jordan Turner, so much of what he's been able to accomplish so quick coming from Wisconsin, the productivity is there, the high IQ is there. And so Iowa, when they're putting together their scouting reports, Turner's name is A1. And so how do you attack a guy who knows how to sort of disguise what he's going to do, who has that ability to create plays behind the line of scrimmage, to create plays in coverage, all sorts of different ways to affect a game. And even when it's not big play stuff, he's, a sure enough tackler that, that's a great way to end a series another way, sort of the old fashioned way is stand a guy up at the line. And so how does Iowa game plan, around him? Do you run right at him? Do you, try to get two guys to the second level? So that is the matchup I'm looking forward to the most, Iowa's offensive line against MSU's front seven.
All right. Okay. Do you have a specific score prediction?
So my prediction is 27-9, which I granted is a lot higher than the spread. But, I'm sure your listeners like listen to this honk, but it's only because, again, like Iowa's big plays come in the run game, which is sort of what you start to lean on, and what Iowa really has leaned on in the second halves of most of their wins is when you've got this power rushing attack, when you've got this very veteran front offensive line, coupled with a defense that makes big plays, that forces turnovers. They forced two turnovers, block kick, three fourth down, failed fourth down conversions against Washington just last week. And again, this is a Phil Parker defense that knows how and when to call opportunistic and aggressive, sort of turnover forcing defenses. They've really made an emphasis of that in the offseason to really restore that turnover count, and it's been paying dividends, surprisingly enough. So I think this is going to be a close game. I don't think it's going to be one of those where after one quarter it's obvious who's going to win. So I'll even do one better than a final score. I'll say it's going to be 7-3 at the half. But as Iowa really starts to lean on that power rushing game, as Johnson starts to break some of those longer runs, as that score starts to sort of lean in Iowa's favor, I think this margin's going to grow, especially in the fourth quarter. So that's how I think it's going to get there. But I do think it will be a competitive and fun game to watch.
Yeah, I think it will be as well. That's what I'm predicting. Better than, what we've seen, like I said, against Ohio State and Oregon. I think it will be a much more competitive match. At least more exciting to watch for a while, is
Yeah,
what I hope
and
for.
Iowa didn't even keep it competitive against Ohio State, and
Yeah, yeah,
would not against Oregon. There's
yeah.
just no reason to expect that either at this point. So there's only so much you can take away from beatings like
Right.
that when it's a quasi pro team lining up on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else that you want to share about Iowa before their matchup against Michigan State?
No, other than the past win was the 200th of Kirk Ferentz's career. He's in third
Oh,
place among Big Ten coaches. If you include Amos Alonzo Stagg at Chicago, if you don't, he's only 5 behind Woody Hayes for most in Big Ten history. So, if any Spartan fans are ardently anti Woody Hayes, can't imagine why anyone would be. But if in the unlikely event, then at the very least, you can take some cold comfort if Iowa ends up winning as expected, that, at the very least, it's going to a good cause, and that is Woody Hayes is no longer atop the Big Ten. There you go.
all right. A good fact, a good fun fact. Um, will anyone from Hawkeye Beacon be attending the game at Michigan State?
Yep, absolutely. Elliot Clough, again, who is our recruiting analyst and football beat writer, will be there. And we also
Okay.
have a photographer that we lined up through Spartans Illustrated.
No way.
So shout out to David for linking that up. So we'll have some extra eye candy coming out of that game. But yep, we will be there
Very
in
cool.
East Lansing representing Hawkeye Beacon. And we're looking forward to covering a fun, competitive, and hopefully healthy game.
Yeah, absolutely. So, your person that's covering the game, will they be tweeting things out? Like, how can fans that are listening follow you guys on socials to kind of get game updates?
Yeah, absolutely. Our Twitter handle is Hawkeye Beacon. Elliot will also be tweeting from his personal handle, and that's
Okay.
Elliot Clough, Clough. So Clough like
Okay.
rough and tough. And I will also be tweeting from home and writing from home at Adam_Jacobi on Twitter. So
All
we will
right.
be all over social media. We will also be, for our premium subscribers, at Hawkeye Beacon, participating in the game thread in the press box premium form there as well. So that is where we will be covering the game, and we will have plenty of free and premium content coming out of the game as well at hawkeyebeacon.com/iowa.rivals.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, check them out. Absolutely. And also check out Spartans Illustrated. We'll be kind of having the same type of group there. We have a photographer, and I think Brendan and Ryan will be in the press box covering the game. Sorry, I have something in my eye. And check us out on Twitter. We'll be live tweeting, and same as Hawkeye Beacon. If you consider subscribing to Spartans Illustrated, you can check out our premium forum where we kind of update game notes there first, kind of give premium content there. Um, And consider subscribing to Red Cedar Radar wherever you listen to your podcasts. We do all audio platforms and find us on YouTube. You can come and look at Adam and I's faces on YouTube. Send us a like there. We would really appreciate it. Like I said, kind of all the socials and stuff that Adam just listed off will be linked in the description. You can check them out and check out Spartans Illustrated stuff there as well. Thank you so much for joining, Adam. It was great talking to you. Um, and we'll see. Maybe best of luck on Saturday. Sorry that you won't be in East Lansing, but I hope that you'll be comfortable on your couch.
Yeah, if there are worse places to be to work than on your couch watching TV
Right.
on a 53-inch TV, right?
Yeah,
Like I think
absolutely.
I'll manage. But Sydney, thank you so much for having me and for being part of the Rivals Network
Yeah,
as
it was
well.
awesome.
And I'm looking forward to everything from you guys' coverage as well.